Marcus Williams looked at the clock on the wall. It was 5:30 in the evening. His long day at Fort Henderson was finally over. He had been working since early morning, training new soldiers and checking equipment. His green Army uniform was still neat and clean, even after the busy day. Marcus was 28 years old and had been in the Army for 8 years. He was a staff sergeant, which meant he was an important leader. Other soldiers looked up to him. His uniform showed many ribbons and medals. These told the story of his service to his country. He had served in Afghanistan twice and had earned awards for his brave work there. As Marcus walked out of the military base, he felt good about his day. He had helped train young soldiers who would soon go overseas. Teaching them the right skills could save their lives. This made Marcus feel proud of his work. The sun was starting to set, painting the sky orange and pink. Marcus walked to his car in the parking lot. It was an old blue Honda, but it ran well. He had bought it used 3 years ago and took good care of it. The car was not fancy, but it got him where he needed to go. Marcus started his car and drove off the base. The guards at the gate saluted him as he passed. This always made him smile. He had worked hard to earn that respect. When he first joined the Army, he was just a scared kid from the poor side of town. Now he was a leader that people trusted. As he drove through the town, Marcus thought about his plans for the evening. His wife Sarah was making dinner for the family. Their 2 kids, Emma and James, would be waiting for him. Emma was 6 years old and loved to hear stories about Daddy's work. James was only 3, but he always got excited when Marcus came home in his uniform. Marcus needed to stop at the grocery store first. Sarah had asked him to pick up milk and bread. She was making now her famous chicken dinner, and they needed these things to complete the meal. The store was only a few blocks away from their house. Marcus turned onto Maple Street. This was a nice part of town with big houses and perfect lawns. The trees were old and tall, making the street look peaceful. Most of the people who lived here had good jobs and nice cars. It was very different from where Marcus had grown up. When Marcus was a kid, his family lived in a small apartment on the other side of town. His mother worked 2 jobs to pay the bills. His father had left when Marcus was 5 years old. Life was hard, but his mother always told him he could do anything if he worked hard enough. School was not easy for Marcus. He struggled with reading when he was young. Some kids made fun of him because his clothes were old and his shoes had holes. But Marcus never gave up. He studied hard and played football. Sports helped him stay out of trouble and taught him about teamwork. After high school, Marcus did not have money for college. The Army seemed like a good choice. It would give him training, education, and a chance to serve his country. His mother cried when he left for basic training, but she was proud of him too. Basic training was the hardest thing Marcus had ever done. The drill sergeants yelled at him every day. He had to wake up at 4:30 in the morning and exercise until he thought he would fall down. But Marcus pushed through. He remembered his mother's words about working hard. After basic training, Marcus learned to be a mechanic. He fixed trucks and other vehicles for the Army. He was good at this work and enjoyed solving problems. His supervisors noticed that he was responsible and smart. They encouraged him to become a leader. Marcus went to leadership school and learned how to train other soldiers. He discovered that he was good at teaching. He could explain difficult things in simple ways. Young soldiers trusted him because he cared about them and their safety. When Marcus was 24, he met Sarah at a friend's wedding. She was beautiful and kind. She worked as a nurse at the local hospital. Sarah did not care that Marcus did not have a college degree. She saw that he was a good man with a big heart. They got married 2 years later. Now, as Marcus drove down Maple Street, he thought about how lucky he was. He had a good job, a loving family, and respect in his community. People thanked him for his service when they saw his uniform. Children looked up to him. He had come a long way from that scared kid in the poor neighborhood. Marcus slowed down as he looked for a parking spot near the grocery store. The street was quiet, with only a few people walking around. Some were walking their dogs, others were jogging. Everyone seemed relaxed and happy in this peaceful neighborhood. He found a parking spot and turned off his car. As he got out, Marcus checked his uniform in the car window. Everything looked good. His name tape was straight, and his ribbons were in the right place. He always wanted to look professional when he was in uniform. It was important to represent the Army well. Marcus locked his car and started walking toward the store. He felt proud wearing his uniform. It showed that he served his country and protected freedom. Every medal and ribbon had a story. Each one represented hard work, sacrifice, and dedication to something bigger than himself. The evening air was cool and fresh. Marcus could smell flowers from the gardens around the big houses. This was such a nice part of town. He hoped that someday he and Sarah could afford to buy a house in a neighborhood like this. Their kids could play safely in yards like these. As Marcus walked, he thought about the grocery list Sarah had given him. Milk, bread, and maybe some ice cream for the kids. It was a simple trip, and he would be home in time for dinner. Sarah always waited for him before serving the food. It was their family tradition. Marcus had no idea that this simple walk to the grocery store would change his life forever. He did not know that in just a few minutes everything would go wrong. He was just a soldier in uniform, walking to buy groceries for his family. But sometimes that is all it takes for trouble to find you. Officer Bradley Mitchell was having a bad day. He had been a police officer for 6 years, but lately everything seemed to go wrong. This morning, his wife had yelled at him about money. His captain had given him extra paperwork because he was late filing his reports. Now he was stuck working the evening shift in this quiet neighborhood where nothing ever happened. Bradley sat in his patrol car with his partner, Officer Ryan Torres. Ryan was newer to the job, only 2 years on the force. He looked up to Bradley and usually followed his lead. They had been driving around Maple Street for an hour looking for anything interesting to do. "This is so boring," Ryan said, eating a donut from the box on the dashboard. "Nothing ever happens in this part of town. Rich people don't cause trouble, like they do downtown." Bradley nodded, but he was thinking about something else. Earlier that day, there had been a call about a burglary on Oak Street, just 2 blocks away. Someone had broken into a house and stolen jewelry. The victim said she saw a black man running away from her house. She could not give a good description, just that he was tall and wearing dark clothes. Bradley and Ryan had looked for the burglar all afternoon but found nothing. The captain was asking questions about why they had not caught anyone yet. Bradley felt pressure to make an arrest. He needed something good to happen to make his day better. "Wait," Bradley said, pointing down the street. "Look at that guy walking." Ryan looked where Bradley was pointing. He saw a black man in what looked like military clothes walking slowly down the sidewalk. The man seemed relaxed, just walking, normally toward the shopping area. "What about him?" Ryan asked. "He looks like a soldier or something." Bradley studied the man more carefully. He was tall and wearing dark green clothes. "Remember that burglary call from earlier? The victim said the guy was tall and wearing dark clothes." Ryan looked again. "But that's a military uniform, not regular. Dark clothes. And the burglary was hours ago." Bradley was already starting the car. Dark green could look black from far away. And who says he changed clothes? Maybe he's trying to blend in by wearing that uniform. "I don't know, Bradley. That looks like a real soldier to me. Look at all those ribbons and stuff on his uniform." But Bradley was not listening. He was tired of having a bad day. He was tired of his captain asking why they had not solved the burglary case. He was tired of Ryan questioning everything he said. Here was a black man in dark clothes just like the victim described. It was close enough. "Anyone can buy military clothes at a surplus store," Bradley said as he drove toward the man. "Criminals do it all the time to look respectable. We need to check this out." Ryan felt uncomfortable, but he did not want to argue with his senior partner. Bradley had more experience, and Ryan was still learning. Maybe Bradley was right. Maybe criminals did dress up like soldiers sometimes. Marcus was still thinking about dinner with his family when he heard a car behind him. He did not pay much attention at first. Cars drove up and down the street all the time. But then he noticed the car was moving very slowly, like it was following him. Marcus turned around and saw a police car. The 2 officers inside were looking at him carefully. Marcus wondered if something was wrong in the neighborhood. Maybe there had been an accident or a crime. He kept walking, but he could feel the officers watching him. The police car stopped and both officers got out. Marcus could see that they were focused on him. This made him nervous, but he tried to stay calm. He had done nothing wrong. He was just walking to the store in his army uniform. Officer Mitchell walked toward Marcus with his hand resting on his gun. His face was serious and unfriendly. Officer Torres followed behind him, looking uncertain about what they were doing. "Excuse me," Bradley called out in a loud voice. "Stop right there." Marcus stopped walking and turned to face the officers. He was confused about why they wanted to talk to him. "Yes, officers? Is there a problem?" Bradley looked Marcus up and down. He saw the military uniform, the ribbons, and the name tape that said Williams. But all he could think about was the burglary case and his bad day. He had made up his mind that this man was suspicious. "We need to talk to you," Bradley said. "There was a burglary in this area earlier today. You fit the description of the suspect." Marcus was shocked. "A burglary? Officer, I think there's been a mistake. I'm Staff Sergeant Marcus Williams, U.S. Army. I just got off work at Fort Henderson. I'm going to the grocery store." Bradley did not seem interested in what Marcus was saying. "Anyone can claim to be in the military. We need to see some identification." Marcus stayed calm, even though he was getting worried. "Of course, officer. My ID is in my wallet. But as you can see, I'm wearing my Army uniform with my name tape and rank clearly visible." Ryan looked more carefully at Marcus's uniform. It really did look real. The ribbons were sewn on perfectly and everything looked official. He had seen soldiers before, and this man looked like the real thing. "Bradley," Ryan said quietly, "this really looks like a real soldier. Maybe we should—" "I'll decide what looks real," Bradley snapped at his partner. He turned back to Marcus. "Put your hands where I can see them and don't move." Marcus slowly raised his hands. He had learned in the military to follow orders from authority figures, even when he disagreed with them. But this felt wrong. He was being treated like a criminal when he had done nothing but walk down a public street. "Officer, I'm happy to show you my military ID," Marcus said calmly. "It will prove who I am. I also have my base access card and my driver's license." Bradley was not interested in looking at any identification. He had convinced himself that Marcus was the burglar and he was not going to change his mind. "Turn around and put your hands on the car." "What?" Marcus could not believe what he was hearing. "Officer, I think there's been a serious misunderstanding. I'm an active duty soldier. I haven't done anything wrong." Other people on the street were starting to notice what was happening. An older woman walking her dog stopped to watch. A man jogging slowed down to see what was going on. Some people were starting to take out their phones. Ryan felt more and more uncomfortable. This did not feel right to him. The man was clearly wearing a real military uniform, and he was being very polite and cooperative. But Bradley was his senior partner, and Ryan did not want to cause problems. "Bradley, maybe we should just check his ID first," Ryan suggested. "If he's really a soldier." "He's not a soldier," Bradley said angrily. "He's a criminal trying to fool us with a fake uniform. Now help me or get out of the way." Marcus realized that Officer Mitchell was not going to listen to reason. Something was very wrong with this situation. He had served his country for 8 years. He had risked his life in Afghanistan. He had trained young soldiers and earned the respect of his commanders. Now he was being treated like a criminal for walking down a street in his own neighborhood. "Officer, please," Marcus said one more time. "Just look at my ID. It will take 2 seconds to prove who I am." But Bradley Mitchell had made up his mind. He was going to arrest this man no matter what. His bad day was about to become much worse. And so was Marcus Williams's day. Neither man knew it yet, but this moment would change both of their lives forever. Marcus felt his heart beating faster as Officer Mitchell stepped closer to him. He could see anger in the officer's eyes, but Marcus could not understand why. He had done nothing wrong. He was just a soldier trying to buy groceries for his family. "Turn around now and put your hands on the car," Bradley ordered again, his voice getting louder. Marcus looked around and saw that more people were watching them. A woman with a baby stroller had stopped on the sidewalk. Two teenagers on bicycles were recording with their phones. An elderly man sitting on his front porch was standing up to get a better look. "Officer Mitchell," Marcus said, reading the name tag on the officer's uniform. "I am Staff Sergeant Marcus Williams. I serve at Fort Henderson. I have identification that proves this. Why won't you let me show it to you?" Bradley was getting more frustrated. This man was asking too many questions instead of just following orders. In Bradley's mind, criminals always tried to talk their way out of trouble. Good people just did what the police told them to do. "Stop talking and do what I say," Bradley shouted. "Turn around right now or we'll make you turn around." "Officer," Torres looked around nervously. More people were gathering to watch what was happening. Some of them looked upset about how the officers were treating the man in the military uniform. Ryan could hear people talking to each other about what they were seeing. "That's a real soldier," someone said. "Why are they bothering him?" "He didn't do anything wrong," another person added. "He was just walking down the street." Ryan pulled Bradley aside and spoke quietly. "Bradley, people are watching us. Maybe we should just check his ID and end this. If he really is a soldier—" "I don't care who's watching," Bradley snapped. "And I don't care if he claims to be a soldier. Anyone can buy a uniform and put on fake ribbons. We're doing our job." But Marcus's uniform was not fake. Every ribbon on his chest had been earned through hard work and dangerous missions. The combat infantry badge showed that he had fought in ground combat. The Bronze Star Medal was for heroic service in Afghanistan. The Army Commendation Medal was for outstanding leadership. These were not fake decorations from a surplus store. Marcus tried one more time to reason with the officers. "Gentlemen, I understand you have a job to do, but I am not the person you're looking for. I am a United States Army soldier. I have been serving my country for 8 years. Please just look at my identification." Bradley had heard enough talking. He grabbed Marcus by the arm and started pushing him toward the police car. "You're going to do what I say, or this is going to get much worse for you." Marcus could not believe what was happening. He had served 2 tours in Afghanistan, where he had faced enemy fire and improvised bombs. He had led soldiers through dangerous missions and brought them all home safely. Now he was being pushed around by a police officer on a quiet street in his own country. But Marcus remembered his training. Even when things went wrong, a good soldier stayed calm and followed the rules. He did not resist as Officer Mitchell pushed him against the car. He kept his hands visible and spoke in a respectful voice. "Officer, I am not resisting. I am cooperating with you. But I want you to know that I am an active duty soldier, and I believe you are making a mistake." Bradley forced Marcus to put his hands on the roof of the police car. He started searching Marcus's pockets roughly, pulling out his wallet, keys, and phone. Marcus's military ID was right there in his wallet, but Bradley did not look at it. "Ryan, get the handcuffs," Bradley ordered. Ryan hesitated. "Bradley, are you sure about this? He's not fighting us. He seems like a good guy. Maybe we should—" "Get the handcuffs now," Bradley yelled. "That's an order." Ryan did not want to disobey his partner, but something felt very wrong about this whole situation. The man they were arresting was polite and calm. He was wearing what looked like a real military uniform with real medals. The people watching them seemed angry about what the officers were doing, but Ryan was young and inexperienced. He had been taught to follow the lead of senior officers. So he got the handcuffs from his belt and handed them to Bradley. Marcus felt the cold metal handcuffs click around his wrists. He could not believe this was really happening. In Afghanistan, he had been trusted to make life-and-death decisions. Other soldiers had depended on him to keep them safe. Now he was being handcuffed like a criminal for walking down a street. "This is wrong," Marcus said quietly. "You are making a big mistake. The only mistake here is you thinking you could fool us with that fake uniform," Bradley replied as he tightened the handcuffs. The crowd of people watching was getting larger. More phones were now recording everything that was happening. People were talking louder and some sounded angry about what they were seeing. "That man is a soldier," a woman called out. "Why are you arresting him?" "He wasn't doing anything wrong," another person added. "This is not right." An older man who had served in the military himself recognized the ribbons on Marcus's uniform. "Those are real medals," he said loudly. That man served in combat. This is disgraceful. Marcus heard the people defending him, and it gave him some hope. At least other people could see that something was wrong with this situation, but he was still handcuffed and being treated like a criminal. Officer Torres was getting more nervous about the growing crowd. Bradley, maybe we should call for backup. These people look upset. Bradley looked around at all the people watching them. He was starting to realize that this situation was getting out of control, but he had gone too far to back down now. He had already handcuffed the man. If he let him go now, it would look like he had made a mistake. "We're fine," Bradley said, trying to sound confident. These people need to mind their own business, but the people were not going to mind their own business. They could see that something unfair was happening to a man who served their country. Some of them were veterans themselves. Others just believed in doing what was right. Marcus stood quietly with his hands cuffed behind his back. He thought about his wife Sarah and his children. They were waiting for him to come home with milk and bread. Instead, he was standing on a street corner, handcuffed and humiliated in front of strangers. Marcus also thought about all the young soldiers he had trained. He had taught them to respect authority and follow the law. He had told them that if they served their country with honor, people would respect them. Now he wondered if he had been wrong about that. But Marcus was not the kind of man who gave up easily. He had survived combat and difficult training. He had overcome poverty and earned respect through hard work. He was not going to let 2 police officers destroy everything he had built. "Officer Mitchell," Marcus said in a calm, clear voice. I'm requesting to call my commanding officer. I have that right as a military service member." Bradley laughed. "You don't have any rights right now except to stay quiet." But Marcus knew his rights, both as a citizen and as a soldier. And he knew that this situation was about to get much more serious for everyone involved. The phone call he was about to make would change everything. Marcus stood on the sidewalk with his hands cuffed behind his back. 20 minutes had passed since Officer Mitchell had handcuffed him. 20 long, embarrassing minutes, while people watched and recorded everything with their phones. Bradley was inside the police car, using the computer to run Marcus's information. He had finally looked at Marcus's driver's license, but he still had not checked the military ID. Bradley was hoping to find something in the computer that would prove Marcus was a criminal. Ryan stood next to Marcus, looking uncomfortable. He kept glancing at the crowd of people who were still watching them. More neighbors had come out of their houses to see what was happening. Some were taking pictures. Others were making phone calls, probably to friends and family to tell them about what they were seeing. "How much longer is this going to take?" Marcus asked Ryan. His voice was still calm, but anyone could tell he was frustrated. "I don't know," Ryan answered quietly. "Bradley is checking your information." Marcus looked at all the people watching him. Some looked angry about what the police were doing. Others looked sad for him. A few teenagers were live streaming the whole thing on social media. Marcus felt embarrassed and angry, but mostly he felt disappointed in his own country. An elderly woman with gray hair walked up to the police car. Her name was Mrs. Henderson, and she had lived on Maple Street for 40 years. She had seen everything that happened from the beginning. "Officer," she said to Ryan, "I watched this whole thing. That young man was just walking down the street. He wasn't bothering anyone. He wasn't doing anything wrong." Ryan looked at her nervously. "Ma'am, we're just doing our job. There was a burglary in the area earlier." "A burglary?" Mrs. Henderson shook her head. "That man is clearly a soldier. Look at his uniform. Look at those medals. My late husband served in Vietnam. I know what real military ribbons look like." Other people in the crowd nodded in agreement. Several of them were veterans or had family members in the military. They could tell that Marcus's uniform and medals were real. A man named Robert Chen had been jogging when he stopped to watch what was happening. He was a lawyer who lived in the neighborhood. He knew about people's rights and what police could and could not do. "Excuse me, officer," Robert said to Ryan. "How long are you planning to detain this man? And what crime do you suspect him of committing?" Ryan did not know how to answer. The truth was they had no real evidence that Marcus had done anything wrong. They only had a vague description from a burglary victim, and Marcus did not really match that description. We're investigating a burglary, Ryan said weakly. But this man is clearly in military uniform, Robert replied. When did this alleged burglary take place? Earlier today, Ryan admitted. And where was this man at that time? Has anyone asked him? Ryan realized he did not know the answer to that question. Neither he nor Bradley had bothered to ask Marcus where he had been when the burglary happened. They had just assumed he was guilty because he was black and tall. Marcus heard the conversation and spoke up. I was on base all day at Fort Henderson. I have dozens of witnesses who can confirm that. I was running a training exercise from 8 a.m. until 5 p.m. There are records of everything I did. Robert nodded. Did you hear that, officer? This man has an alibi. He was on a military base when your burglary happened. Why is he still in handcuffs? More. People in the crowd started asking the same question. Why was a soldier being treated like a criminal when he clearly had not done anything wrong? Inside the police car, Bradley was getting frustrated. The computer check had come back clean. Marcus Williams had no criminal record. He had never been arrested. He had never even gotten a speeding ticket. His record was completely spotless. But Bradley did not want to admit he had made a mistake. His pride was getting in the way of doing the right thing. He had handcuffed this man in front of all these people. If he let Marcus go now, everyone would know that Bradley had been wrong. Bradley got out of the car and walked over to where Marcus was standing. The crowd got quiet, waiting to see what would happen next. Well? Marcus asked. Did you find anything in your computer that makes you think I'm a criminal? Bradley's face was red with anger and embarrassment. Your record came back clean, but that doesn't mean anything. Criminals don't always get caught. The crowd gasped at Bradley's words. Even Ryan looked shocked. People in the crowd started talking loudly about what Bradley had just said. That's ridiculous, someone called out. You can't arrest someone just because you think they might be a criminal. This is America, another person added. People are innocent until proven guilty. Mrs. Henderson walked up to Bradley with fire in her eyes. Young man, I have lived in this neighborhood for 40 years. I have seen good police officers and bad police officers. Right now you are being a very bad police officer. Bradley felt attacked from all sides. The crowd was against him. His partner looked uncomfortable. Even dispatch was asking him for updates about why he was taking so long, with a simple identity check. Everyone needs to back up and let us do our job, Bradley shouted at the crowd. But a man named David Martinez, who was a retired Army sergeant, stepped forward. He had been watching everything and getting angrier by the minute. Your job? David said loudly. Your job is to protect and serve, not to harass soldiers who serve their country. I can see this man's ribbons from here. He has a combat infantry badge. That means he fought for our freedom while you were probably sitting at home watching TV. Other veterans in the crowd started speaking up too. They were angry about seeing a fellow soldier being treated this way. Marcus was one of their own, and they were not going to stand by and watch him be humiliated. Marcus listened to all these people defending him. It made him feel better to know that good people could see what was wrong with this situation. But he was still handcuffed, still being treated like a criminal, still missing dinner with his family. Officer Mitchell, Marcus said, using his military voice that commanded attention. I am requesting to make a phone call to my commanding officer. I have that right under military regulations and civilian law. Bradley laughed meanly. You think calling your pretend commanding officer is going to help you? Anyone can pretend to be in the military. Pretend? Marcus's voice got harder. You think I'm pretending to be a soldier? You think these ribbons are fake? You think this bronze star is something I bought at a costume shop? The crowd was getting more upset. Someone had already called the local news station. Other people were posting videos on social media with captions like, "Police harass decorated soldier" and "Racism in action on Maple Street." Ryan pulled Bradley aside and whispered urgently, "Bradley, this is getting out of hand. We need to end this. These people are recording everything. If this gets on the news, we're going to be in big trouble." But Bradley was too proud and too stubborn to admit his mistake. We started this and we're going to finish it. I don't care who's watching. Marcus stood in the middle of it all, still calm, still dignified, even with handcuffs on his wrists. He had been trained to handle difficult situations and he was not going to lose his temper now. But inside, he was planning his next move. He was going to make that phone call to his commanding officer. And when he did, Officer Bradley Mitchell was going to learn what it really meant to mess with the United States Army. A police supervisor arrived on the scene just as the crowd was getting more upset. Sergeant Lisa Rodriguez had been a police officer for 15 years. She was known for being fair and smart. When she got the radio call about a situation on Maple Street, she decided to check it out herself. Sergeant Rodriguez parked her car and looked at the scene. She saw Officer Mitchell and Officer Torres with a black man in military uniform who was handcuffed. She saw a large crowd of angry people with phones recording everything. She knew right away that this was a bad situation. "Mitchell, Torres, what's going on here?" Sergeant Rodriguez asked as she walked up to them. Bradley tried to explain himself. "Sergeant, we got a call about a burglary earlier. This man fits the description of the suspect. We're just checking him out." Sergeant Rodriguez looked at Marcus carefully. She saw his army uniform, his ribbons, and his name tape. She had worked with military police before and knew what real uniforms looked like. This was clearly a real soldier. "What's your name, soldier?" she asked Marcus. "Staff Sergeant Marcus Williams, ma'am. I serve at Fort Henderson. I was just walking to the grocery store when these officers stopped me." Sergeant Rodriguez frowned. "How long has he been detained?" Ryan looked at his watch. "About 25 minutes, Sergeant." 25 minutes? Sergeant Rodriguez was surprised. "For a simple identity check? What's taking so long?" Bradley started to get defensive. "He won't cooperate with us. He keeps claiming to be a soldier, but anyone can buy a uniform." Sergeant Rodriguez looked at Bradley like he was crazy. "Officer Mitchell, I can see his uniform from here. Those ribbons look real to me. Have you checked his military ID?" "We don't need to check anything," Bradley said stubbornly. "We're handling this our way." But Sergeant Rodriguez was the senior officer, on the scene now. She was in charge, not Bradley. "Officer Mitchell, uncuff this man immediately and check his identification properly." "But Sergeant," Bradley started to argue. "That's an order, Mitchell. Uncuff him now." Bradley did not want to follow the order, but he had no choice. He slowly walked over to Marcus and unlocked the handcuffs. Marcus rubbed his wrists where the metal had been tight. "Thank you, Sergeant," Marcus said politely. "Now may I please make a phone call to my commanding officer?" "Of course," Sergeant Rodriguez said. "That's your right. Officer Torres, give this man his phone." Ryan handed Marcus his phone. Marcus scrolled through his contacts and found the number for Colonel Patricia Hayes. She was his commanding officer and one of the most respected leaders at Fort Henderson. The crowd got quiet as Marcus dialed the number. Everyone wanted to see what would happen when he made this call. Bradley stood with his arms crossed, still believing that Marcus was lying about being in the military. The phone rang twice before Colonel Hayes answered. "This is Colonel Hayes." "Colonel, this is Staff Sergeant Williams. I'm sorry to bother you after hours, but I have a serious situation." Colonel Hayes had known Marcus for 3 years. He was one of her best soldiers, always professional and trustworthy. She could hear stress in his voice, which was unusual for him. "What's wrong, Marcus?" she asked with concern. "Ma'am, I'm on Maple Street near the base. I was walking to the grocery store in uniform when 2 police officers stopped me. They said I fit the description of a burglary suspect. They handcuffed me and detained me for over 20 minutes. They refused to look at my military ID." Colonel Hayes was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was very serious. "Marcus, are you hurt? Are you safe?" "I'm not hurt, ma'am. A police sergeant just arrived and had me uncuffed. But this whole situation has been very wrong. I was treated like a criminal for walking down the street in my army uniform." "Put me on speakerphone," Colonel Hayes ordered. "I want to talk to these officers." Marcus looked at Sergeant Rodriguez. "My commanding officer wants to speak with you. May I put her on speaker?" "Of course," Sergeant Rodriguez said. Marcus pressed the speaker button on his phone. Colonel Hayes's voice was clear and strong. "This is Colonel Patricia Hayes, commanding officer of the 3rd Battalion at Fort Henderson. To whom am I speaking?" "This Is Sergeant Rodriguez with the City Police Department, ma'am? Sergeant Rodriguez, I want to understand what happened here. Staff Sergeant Williams is one of my most trusted soldiers. He has served 2 combat tours in Afghanistan and has a spotless record. Why was he detained? Sergeant Rodriguez looked at Bradley, who was starting to look very nervous. Ma'am, there seems to have been a misunderstanding. Officers Mitchell and Torres thought he might be connected to a burglary case. A burglary case? Colonel Hayes's voice got harder. Sergeant Williams was on base all day running training exercises. I have records of every minute of his duty day. He couldn't possibly be connected to any burglary. The crowd of people listening started nodding and talking to each other. They had been right all along. Marcus was innocent and the police had made a terrible mistake. Furthermore, Colonel Hayes continued, Sergeant Williams is wearing his dress uniform with his ribbons and medals clearly visible. Any law enforcement officer should be able to recognize a real military uniform. Bradley was starting to sweat. This was not going the way he had expected. He thought the phone call would prove that Marcus was lying. Instead, it was proving that Marcus was telling the truth. Colonel, may I ask you a question? Sergeant Rodriguez said. Of course. Can you describe Sergeant Williams's ribbons and medals? I want to confirm we're talking about the same person. Colonel Hayes did not hesitate. Sergeant Williams has been awarded the Bronze Star Medal for heroic service in Afghanistan, the Combat Infantry Badge for ground combat, 2 Army Commendation, medals for outstanding leadership, the Afghanistan Campaign Medal, and several other service ribbons. He is also qualified as an expert marksman. Sergeant Rodriguez looked at Marcus's uniform. Every ribbon Colonel Hayes had described was exactly where it should be on his chest. Thank you, Colonel, that matches what I see on his uniform. Sergeant Rodriguez, I need to know the names and badge numbers of the officers who detained my soldier. This incident will be reported to the appropriate authorities. Bradley felt his stomach drop. He realized that he was in serious trouble. This was not just a regular citizen he had arrested. This was a decorated military hero with a commanding officer who was not going to let this go. I want to come to the scene myself, Colonel Hayes said. What is the exact location? We're on Maple Street near the corner of Oak Avenue, Sergeant Rodriguez replied. I'll be there in 15 minutes. Do not let anyone leave until I arrive. The phone call ended, and everyone stood in silence for a moment. Marcus put his phone back in his pocket and looked at Officer Mitchell. Officer Mitchell, Marcus said calmly, my commanding officer is on her way here. She's going to want to hear your explanation for why you treated a United States soldier like a criminal. Bradley's face had gone pale. He was starting to realize that his bad day was about to become much worse. In 15 minutes, he was going to have to explain to a military colonel why he had handcuffed an innocent soldier. The crowd of people was still watching and recording everything. Someone called out, "The colonel is coming, this is going to be good." Marcus stood straighter in his uniform. Help was on the way and justice was about to be served. Exactly 14 minutes later, a black military vehicle pulled up to the scene. The crowd turned to watch as Colonel Patricia Hayes stepped out of her car. She was a tall woman with short gray hair and a uniform covered with ribbons that showed decades of service. Her presence commanded immediate respect. Colonel Hayes was 52 years old and had been in the Army for 30 years. She had served in Iraq, Afghanistan, and several other places around the world. She had led thousands of soldiers and earned a reputation for being tough but fair. When one of her soldiers was in trouble, she protected them like a mother protecting her children. As Colonel Hayes walked toward the group, everyone could see the authority in her step. Her uniform was perfect, her posture was straight, and her face showed controlled anger. She had seen the videos that people had posted online during her drive to the scene. She knew exactly what had happened to Marcus. Staff Sergeant Williams, Colonel Hayes said as she approached Marcus. Marcus snapped to attention and saluted. Good evening, Colonel. Colonel Hayes returned the salute, then looked Marcus over carefully. Are you injured, Sergeant? No, ma'am, I'm not injured, but I am disappointed and angry about how I was treated. Colonel Hayes nodded. As you should be. She turned to face the police officers. Which one of you is Officer Mitchell? Bradley stepped forward nervously. He had never been in trouble with a military officer before, and Colonel Hayes was much more intimidating than he had expected. "I'm Officer Mitchell, ma'am." Colonel Hayes stared at him for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was calm but very serious. "Officer Mitchell, I want you to explain to me why you handcuffed one of my soldiers and detained him for nearly 30 minutes. Bradley tried to sound confident, but his voice shook a little. "Ma'am, we had a report of a burglary in the area. He fit the description of the suspect." "He fit the description?" Colonel Hayes looked at Marcus, then back at Bradley. "Officer Mitchell, Sergeant Williams is wearing a United States Army uniform with his name tape clearly visible. He has ribbons and medals that show he is a combat veteran. What part of that fits the description of a burglar?" Bradley did not know how to answer that question. The truth was that Marcus only fit the description because he was a tall black man. But Bradley could not say that out loud. "Anyone can buy a military uniform," Bradley said weakly. Colonel Hayes's eyes flashed with anger. "Officer Mitchell, are you telling me that you think Sergeant Williams is wearing a fake uniform?" "Well, it's possible." "Let me stop you right there," Colonel Hayes interrupted. "I have been in the military for 30 years. I know what real uniforms look like. I know what real ribbons look like. And I know what real soldiers look like. Sergeant Williams is absolutely, without question, a real soldier." The crowd of people watching started clapping and cheering. Finally, someone with authority was standing up for Marcus and telling the truth about what had happened. Colonel Hayes continued speaking to Bradley. "Furthermore, Officer Mitchell, Sergeant Williams was on Fort Henderson all day today. He was running a training exercise under my direct supervision. I have security camera footage, sign-in sheets, and witness statements that prove where he was every minute of today." Sergeant Rodriguez stepped forward. "Colonel Hayes, I want to apologize for what happened here. This should never have occurred." Colonel Hayes looked at Sergeant Rodriguez with a little more respect. "Sergeant, I appreciate your professionalism. You seem to understand that a mistake was made here." "Yes, ma'am, a serious mistake." Colonel Hayes pulled out her phone and started taking pictures of Officer Mitchell and Officer Torres. She photographed their name tags and badge numbers. She also took pictures of their police car and license plate. "What are you doing?" Bradley asked nervously. "I am documenting this incident," Colonel Hayes replied. "These photos will be included in my official report to the police chief, the mayor, and the Department of Defense." Bradley felt sick to his stomach. He was starting to understand that this incident was going to follow him for the rest of his career. Colonel Hayes turned to Marcus. "Sergeant Williams, I want you to tell me exactly what happened here, from the beginning." Marcus stood at attention and gave a clear, detailed report of everything that had occurred. He described how the officers had approached him, how they had refused to look at his ID, how they had handcuffed him, and how they had kept him detained for over 20 minutes. Colonel Hayes listened carefully to every word. When Marcus finished his report, she turned back to the police officers. "Officer Mitchell, Officer Torres, I want your badge numbers and the name of your commanding officer." Ryan gave his information willingly. He was young and scared, and he knew he had made a mistake by following Bradley's lead, but Bradley hesitated. "Officer Mitchell," Colonel Hayes said in a voice that could freeze fire, "I asked for your badge number. That was not a request." Bradley slowly gave his badge number. His hands were shaking as he spoke. Colonel Hayes wrote everything down in a small notebook. "I will be filing formal complaints against both of you. Officer Mitchell, your behavior tonight was unprofessional, disrespectful, and possibly criminal." "Criminal?" Bradley's voice cracked. "Unlawful detention, violation of civil rights, and failure to perform your duties properly." "Yes, Officer Mitchell, those are crimes." The crowd was loving every minute of this. Someone shouted, "Give him hell." "Colonel?" Colonel Hayes ignored the crowd and focused on the officers. "I want to make something very clear to both of you. The men and women of the United States military put their lives on the line to protect the freedoms that you have sworn to uphold. When you attack one of my soldiers, you attack the institution that I have served for 30 years. She pointed at Marcus. "This man has been shot at by enemies of our country. He has led other soldiers through dangerous missions. He has earned every ribbon on his chest through blood, sweat, and sacrifice. And you treated him like a common criminal because you were too lazy or too prejudiced to do your job properly. Bradley was now sweating heavily. He had never been spoken to like this before, especially not in front of a crowd of people recording everything. Colonel Hayes was not finished. Officer Mitchell, you said that anyone can buy a military uniform. Let me tell you something about these ribbons that Sergeant Williams is wearing. You cannot buy a bronze star at a surplus store. You cannot fake a combat infantry badge. These decorations represent real service, real sacrifice, and real honor. She stepped closer to Bradley. Do you know what Sergeant Williams was doing when he earned his bronze star? He was pulling wounded soldiers out of a burning vehicle while under enemy fire in Afghanistan. He risked his own life to save others, and you handcuffed him like he was a criminal. The crowd was completely silent now. Even the people who had been talking and taking pictures were listening to every word Colonel Hayes said. Officer Mitchell, Colonel Hayes continued, Sergeant Williams has done more for this country in one day than you will do in your entire career. And tonight you have dishonored not just him, but every person who wears the uniform of the United States. Bradley looked like he wanted to disappear. He had never felt so small and ashamed in his entire life. Colonel Hayes turned to Sergeant Rodriguez. Sergeant, I expect a full investigation of this incident. I want these officers disciplined appropriately, and I want assurance that nothing like this will ever happen to another one of my soldiers. Yes, ma'am. Sergeant Rodriguez replied. You have my word. Colonel Hayes looked at Marcus one more time. Sergeant Williams, you handled yourself with dignity and professionalism tonight. You represent the best of what the Army stands for. Thank you, Colonel. Now go home to your family. They're probably worried about you. As Marcus walked away, with Colonel Hayes, the crowd began to break up. But many people were already sharing videos of what they had witnessed. By morning, the whole city would know what had happened on Maple Street, and Officer Bradley Mitchell's troubles were just beginning. The next morning, Police Chief Robert Thompson arrived at work to find his phone ringing nonstop. Videos of the incident on Maple Street had spread across social media overnight. Local news stations were calling for interviews. The mayor's office was demanding answers. And Colonel Hayes had already sent a formal complaint letter that was sitting on his desk. Chief Thompson was a good man who had been a police officer for 28 years. He believed in doing the right thing and holding his officers accountable. When he watched the videos of Marcus being handcuffed, he felt angry and embarrassed. This was not how he wanted his department to be seen by the community. The first thing Chief Thompson did was call a meeting with Sergeant Rodriguez to get all the facts about what had happened. She told him everything she had witnessed and heard from the witnesses. Chief, I've been a cop for 15 years, Sergeant Rodriguez said. I've never seen anything like this. Officer Mitchell ignored obvious evidence that the man was a real soldier. He refused to check proper identification, and he kept the man handcuffed even when it was clear he had made a mistake. Chief Thompson shook his head sadly. What about Officer Torres? Torres is young and inexperienced. He followed Mitchell's lead, but he seemed uncomfortable with what was happening. Several witnesses said Torres looked like he wanted to stop what was happening but didn't know how. Chief Thompson reviewed the official reports that both officers had written about the incident. Officer Mitchell's report was full of lies and excuses. He claimed that Marcus had been acting suspicious and refused to cooperate. But the videos showed that Marcus had been polite and cooperative the entire time. Officer Torres's report was more honest. He admitted that Marcus had been wearing what appeared to be a real military uniform. He wrote that Marcus had offered to show identification, but that Officer Mitchell had refused to look at it. By noon, the story had reached the local television stations. Channel 7 News sent a reporter to interview people in the neighborhood where the incident had happened. Everyone they talked to said the same thing. Marcus had done nothing wrong and the police officers had treated him unfairly. Mrs. Henderson, the elderly woman who had defended Marcus, spoke to the reporter. That young soldier was just walking to the store. He was polite and respectful even when those officers were treating him badly. It was disgraceful to watch. The retired Army Sergeant David Martinez was even more angry when he talked to the news. That man earned his ribbons in combat. He put his life on the line for our freedom, and these cops treated him like dirt. It makes me sick. The news station also interviewed Robert Chen, the lawyer who had questioned the officers. What I witnessed was a clear violation of that man's civil rights. He was detained without probable cause and treated differently because of his race. There's no other explanation for what happened. By afternoon, the story had reached the mayor's office. Mayor Jennifer Adams was furious when she saw the videos. She had worked hard to improve relationships between the police and the community, especially with minority groups. This incident threatened to undo years of progress. Mayor Adams called Chief Thompson to her office for an emergency meeting. "Chief, this is a disaster. I've got community leaders calling me, the military is upset, and the whole thing is all over social media. What are you going to do about it?" "I'm conducting a full investigation," Chief Thompson replied. "I'm interviewing all the witnesses and reviewing all the evidence. If my officers did wrong, they will be held accountable." "If they did wrong?" Mayor Adams showed him her computer screen with the videos. "Chief, it's right there for everyone to see. They handcuffed an innocent soldier for no good reason." Meanwhile, Colonel Hayes was conducting her own investigation from the military side. She had spoken with Marcus several times to get his complete account of what happened. She had also reviewed the base security footage that showed Marcus on base all day, proving he could not have committed any burglary. Colonel Hayes called the Department of Defense to report the incident. The military took these matters very seriously when their service members were mistreated by civilian authorities. A formal investigation would be opened at the federal level. She also called the FBI to report a possible civil rights violation. The FBI had a special unit that investigated cases where police officers might have violated someone's rights because of their race. Back at the police station, Chief Thompson called Officer Mitchell into his office. Bradley walked in looking nervous and tired. He had not slept much the night before, knowing that his career was probably over. "Officer Mitchell, I've reviewed your report about last night's incident. I've also watched all the videos that witnesses took. Your report does not match what actually happened." Bradley tried to defend himself. "Chief, I was just doing my job. The man fit the description." "Stop right there," Chief Thompson interrupted. "I've seen the original burglary report. The victim said she saw a black man running from her house wearing jeans and a dark t-shirt. Sergeant Williams was wearing a military uniform with ribbons and medals. How exactly did he fit that description?" Bradley could not answer that question, honestly, without admitting that he had targeted Marcus simply because he was black. "Furthermore," Chief Thompson continued, "I've spoken with the burglary victim again. She confirmed that the man she saw was much shorter than Sergeant Williams and was wearing completely different clothes. You had no legitimate reason to stop him." Chief Thompson pulled out a thick folder. "Mitchell, I've been looking at your record. This isn't the first time you've been accused of racial profiling. There have been 3 other complaints against you in the past 2 years." Bradley's face went pale. He had hoped that those earlier incidents would not come up. In each case, you stopped or arrested minority citizens without proper cause. In each case, the charges were dropped or the stops were ruled improper. I should have dealt with this problem before now." Chief Thompson stood up and walked to his window. "Mitchell, you've embarrassed this department and violated the trust of our community. You've also committed what appears to be a federal crime by violating Sergeant Williams' civil rights. Chief, please, I'm suspending you immediately without pay pending the outcome of this investigation. You are to turn in your badge, your gun, and your patrol car keys right now." Bradley felt like the world was falling apart around him. "Chief, I have a family. I have bills to pay. This job is all I know." "You should have thought about that before you decided to treat an innocent man like a criminal," Chief Thompson replied, coldly. Officer Torres was also called in for questioning. Unlike Bradley, Ryan was honest about what had happened. He admitted that he had doubts about stopping Marcus from the beginning. He said he knew the man looked like a real soldier, but that he had followed his senior partner's lead. "Torres, you made serious mistakes last night," Chief Thompson said, "but you've been honest about what happened, and witnesses say you seemed uncomfortable with Mitchell's actions." "I was uncomfortable, Chief. I knew it was wrong, but I didn't know how to stop it." That's exactly the problem. When you see another officer doing something wrong, you have a duty to speak up. You have a duty to protect innocent people even from other police officers. Chief Thompson decided to suspend Torres for 1 week without pay and require him to attend additional training on civil rights and proper police procedures. By the end of the week, the investigation was complete. The evidence was overwhelming that Officer Mitchell had violated Marcus's rights and had lied in his official report. The district attorney announced that criminal charges would be filed against Mitchell for violating federal civil rights laws. The police department also faced a lawsuit from Marcus, who hired Robert Chen as his lawyer. The city would eventually settle the case for a large amount of money and agree to implement new training programs for all police officers. But the biggest consequence was still to come. The police commission was meeting to decide Officer Mitchell's fate, and the whole community was watching to see if justice would really be served. 2 weeks after the incident on Maple Street, the police commission held a public hearing to decide Officer Bradley Mitchell's fate. The hearing room was packed with people from the community, including many of the neighbors who had witnessed Marcus being handcuffed. Marcus sat in the front row wearing his dress uniform. Colonel Hayes sat beside him, along with several other military officers who had come to show their support. The message was clear. The entire military community was watching this case. Bradley Mitchell sat at a table with his lawyer, looking nervous and defeated. His wife sat behind him, crying quietly. She knew that their lives were about to change forever. Commissioner Sarah Williams, who chaired the police commission, called the hearing to order. We are here today to determine the employment status of Officer Bradley Mitchell following his actions on September 8, 2025. The commission had already reviewed all the evidence, the witness videos, the police reports, the body camera footage, and testimony from everyone involved. The facts were not in dispute. The only question was what punishment Mitchell would receive. Chief Thompson stood up to present the department's findings. Commissioners, our investigation found that Officer Mitchell violated multiple department policies and state laws. He detained Staff Sergeant Williams without probable cause, refused to check proper identification, and filed a false police report. Chief Thompson continued, more seriously, Officer Mitchell's actions appear to be motivated by racial bias. Staff Sergeant Williams was targeted because he is a black man, not because he had committed any crime or matched any real suspect description. The commission then heard testimony from witnesses. Mrs. Henderson testified about what she had seen from her front porch. That officer decided that young man was guilty before he even talked to him. It was clear as day that he was wearing a real military uniform, but the officer didn't care. David Martinez, the retired Army sergeant, gave emotional testimony about what the incident meant to the military community. When you attack one soldier for no reason, you attack all of us. That man earned his ribbons in combat, and he deserved better from the police who are supposed to protect him. Robert Chen, who was now Marcus's lawyer, testified about the legal implications. What happened to Staff Sergeant Williams was a clear violation of his Fourth Amendment rights and his civil rights under federal law. This was not a mistake or poor judgment. This was deliberate misconduct. Then it was time for Marcus himself to speak. He stood up in his uniform and addressed the commission with the same calm dignity he had shown throughout the entire ordeal. Commissioners, I have served my country for 8 years. I have been deployed to combat zones twice. I have trained young soldiers and led them through dangerous missions. I have always believed that when I came home, I would be treated with respect by my fellow Americans. Marcus paused, letting his words sink in. What happened to me on Maple Street was not just an attack on me personally. It was an attack on every person who wears the uniform of the United States military. It was an attack on the values that I thought I was fighting to defend. The room was completely quiet as Marcus continued. I don't want this to happen to anyone else. I don't want another soldier to be humiliated the way I was humiliated. And I don't want police officers to think they can treat people differently because of the color of their skin. When Marcus finished speaking, many people in the room were wiping tears from their eyes. His words had been powerful and dignified, just like his behavior throughout the entire incident. Officer Mitchell was given a chance to speak in his own defense. He stood up slowly, looking ashamed and defeated. Commissioners, I know I made mistakes that night. I know I treated Staff Sergeant Williams unfairly. I let my emotions and my prejudices cloud my judgment, and I'm sorry for that. But Mitchell's apology sounded hollow after everything that had happened. He had only admitted his mistakes after being caught and exposed. Many people in the room did not believe he was truly sorry. The commission deliberated for only 30 minutes before reaching their decision. Commissioner Williams announced the verdict to the packed hearing room. Officer Bradley Mitchell, this commission finds that your conduct on September 8th was unacceptable and incompatible with the values of this police department. You violated the civil rights of an innocent citizen and brought shame to the badge you swore to honor, she continued. Furthermore, your false police report shows a complete lack of integrity. Police officers must be truthful in all their dealings, especially in official reports that can affect people's lives and freedom. Commissioner Williams looked directly at Mitchell. Officer Mitchell, you are hereby terminated from the police department, effective immediately. You will forfeit all benefits, including your pension. You are also banned from working in law enforcement anywhere in this state. The crowd erupted in applause. Justice had been served. Marcus felt a weight lift from his shoulders as he heard the words he had been hoping for. But the consequences for Mitchell were not over. The district attorney had already filed criminal charges against him for violating Marcus's civil rights under federal law. Mitchell would face a trial and could go to prison if convicted. Officer Torres received a different punishment. Because he had been honest about what happened and had shown remorse, he was suspended for 2 weeks without pay and required to complete 80 hours of training on civil rights and cultural sensitivity. He would be on probation for 1 year, meaning any future misconduct could cost him his job. The city also agreed to settle Marcus's lawsuit for $250,000 and implemented new policies to prevent similar incidents. All police officers would receive additional training on recognizing military uniforms and treating service members with respect. They would also receive updated training on racial bias and civil rights. Chief Thompson used the incident as an opportunity to reform his department. He created a new citizen oversight committee that included veterans and community leaders. He also established a direct hotline between the police department and Fort Henderson to handle any future issues involving military personnel. Colonel Hayes was satisfied with the outcome, but she made sure the lessons learned would spread beyond just this one city. She worked with other military bases around the country to establish better communication with local police departments. She wanted to make sure no other soldier would face what Marcus had endured. Marcus returned to his normal life, but he had become something of a local hero. People recognized him when he went to the grocery store or walked around town. Children pointed at his uniform with respect and admiration. He had shown that standing up for what was right could make a real difference. Marcus also became an advocate for police reform and civil rights. He spoke at community meetings and police training sessions, sharing his story and teaching others about the importance of treating everyone with dignity and respect. The incident on Maple Street became a turning point for the community. It showed that good people would stand up against injustice when they saw it. It proved that accountability was possible when citizens demanded it, and it demonstrated that one phone call to the right person really could change everything. Bradley Mitchell lost his career, his reputation, and his freedom. He was eventually convicted of violating Marcus's civil rights and sentenced to 6 months in federal prison. His family suffered financially and had to move to another state to escape the shame of what he had done. But Marcus Williams continued to serve his country with honor. He was promoted to Sergeant First Class and eventually became one of the top training instructors at Fort Henderson. Young soldiers looked up to him not just for his military skills but for his courage in standing up for what was right. The story of what happened on Maple Street spread far beyond that one neighborhood. It became a symbol of how ordinary people could fight against injustice and win. It showed that the truth would come out when good people refused to stay silent. And it proved that in America, even a decorated soldier could face prejudice and unfair treatment. But the system could still work when people demanded justice and accountability. Marcus never forgot that difficult evening, but he also never forgot how his community had stood up for him. It reminded him why he served his country and why the fight for equality and justice was worth continuing, one person and one incident at a time.